Okay, we'll call the meeting April 15th, 2019 PHWA board meeting to order. Can we get a roll call, please?
Vice Chair Bouchard.
Here.
Member Marcus.
Here.
Member Hernandez.
Here.
Member Jacobson. Here. And noting the absence of Member Rollins and Chair Munoz-Schnapps.
Okay. Do you guys generally start your meetings with the pledge?
No, we don't.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Do you guys generally start your meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance?
No.
Oh,
we have
okay.
Not done
All
this.
right. All right, then we'll move ahead to public comment. Seeing none, we have a special presentation from United Water Conservation District on the iron and manganese removal facility. If it's the pleasure of the remaining board members, perhaps we want to at least approve the consent agenda and maybe take the Brackish Water Reclamation Demonstration Facility operational report out of order and give time for the other members to show up and see the entire United presentation.
Sure. Is that okay? Oh, there she is. Yeah.
Perfect.
Oh, there
See?
you are.
So we stalled for just long enough. Okay. Then I'll turn the meeting back over to Chair Munoz.
Okay, super. So, can you let me know where we are?
So we're
Just right here?
Yeah, we were going to take these items out of order, trying
Okay.
to give you time to get here, but if you want to move ahead once you're here.
Okay, great. All right. So, we will start with the presentation on iron and manganese removal facility, and that's with United Water Conservation. Oh, I'm on. There we go. Super.
Thank you very much. My name is Mauricio Guardado. I'm the General Manager for United Water Conservation District, and really can't thank you enough and appreciate the time you're allocating for our group to provide you with this presentation. Just would like to acknowledge a couple people in the audience, our team that is present tonight to help facilitate the presentation. We have our engineer, Robert Richardson, Dr. Miriam Brawl, our chief engineer for United. We have our manager of operations and maintenance in Brian Collins, and Jeff Savart, which is one of the consultants working on the project of iron manganese treatment. And we also have our Secretary Treasurer Director Bruce Dandy in the audience joining us this evening. So again, appreciate the time, and you know, hopefully be extremely informative for you. We thought we'd start off with, let's see, I think for this, with the mouse, do I just click it and it'll go to the next slide? There we go. Figured it might be a good opportunity, especially because where the proposed treatment facility will be at El Rio. I'm going to give you just a very quick update of our recent water operations with the precipitation we had, but also some of the creative things that we've done to bring in some of the new water. And this is a shot of our Lake Piru, Santa Felicia Dam. And we were truly excited to report that it's about 80% full at this time. I know when I first started, I've been here just over 3 years now, it was significantly low, almost looking like a pond out there. And now with about 80% full, in addition to the runoff, and you know, this facility really just naturally impounds the water that runs off from the tributary areas. We purchased in the last 2 years 25,000 acre feet of new water that's available to state contractors due to large precipitation up north. And when there's when the reservoirs are full and there's a lot of snowpack, there's additional water, really high quality, cost effective water that's available. And we put ourselves in position to buy some of that, and that really helped elevate the lake levels. So I think we actually have brought in about 70,000 acre feet of water through this whole impoundment and purchase of new water. That's the Freeman diversion. Some of you have been on that tour and are familiar with it, probably been out there when that's been dry. But you know, again, some exciting times with the precipitation we had. We were able to divert water off the Santa Clara River. And what made this particular operation in this particular year very unique is we've been under some very stringent regulatory circumstances as a result of not just a lawsuit, but the National Marine Fisheries Service and their issued biological opinion that it really enforces more of that water to remain in the river rather than diverting and recharging. So, but as a result, we were able to take more of the high turbidity water. It was almost like, it just looked like chocolate milk. It's high sediment laden. And we were able to take that dirtier water and push it through the system to try to get everything that we could under the circumstances. And we were really excited to report that as a result, in operations working significant overtime to make sure screens and everything else were clean, we brought in approximately 17,000 acre-feet of water from the Freeman diversion, which is quite a bit of water.
Yes, so we have a question. Can we interject
Yeah,
with questions here throughout the presentation?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you, Mauricio. I'm just taking some notes. You mentioned on your last slide 70,000 acre-feet. That's total impoundment. That wasn't, is that state water?
No, that's total impoundment.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, it was, in the last 2 years, it's been about 25,000 acre-feet of water that we brought in. It's supplemental water from the state.
Thank you.
That photo there you see is a result of taking that dirtier water. That's our desilting basin, and you can see, you know, a big mound is developing here in that first stretch. But again, that desilting basin certainly was working overtime to make sure we get the water down to the El Rio site, which really affects Port Hueneme. That's one of our noble basins. We've got about 700 total acre-feet of spreading ground capability. So this is one of those particular recharge sites. And then that's El Rio. And that's primarily, you know, the function that we perform for you guys is, you know, we get water to this particular site. We fill up those ponds when water is available, recharge it back in the ground, pump it, treat it, and send it down the OH system so that you and your residents can have high quality water. And if we weren't able to perform and get creative with the kind of diversions we had to with the high turbidity water, we would have been able to only take a fraction of what we actually brought in, maybe to the tune of only 6,000 to 7,000 as opposed to 17,000, again, due to the regulations. So we did some creative, and fortunately we were able to fill quite a few of those ponds that will significantly benefit the OH system. So with that being said, I'd like to transition and invite our engineer, Robert Richardson, up to talk about the iron manganese treatment proposal that we have for this particular site to, again, enhance the sustainability of water for this area. So with that, Robert.
Thank you, Mr. Guardado. Good afternoon, members of the board of the Port Hueneme Water Agency. I'm Robert Richardson, and it's an honor to be here today to present to you the iron and manganese treatment plant, which we believe is an important project for the Oxnard-Hueneme pipeline system. So first, I'd like to briefly introduce the genesis of the Oxnard-Hueneme pipeline. In the early 1900s, there was a growing demand for water, and new groundwater wells were being drilled. Pumping started to outpace natural replenishment. Coastal seawater was occurring, and in the 1950s and 1960s extended to the area shown in red. Many of the wells were abandoned in the seawater intrusion zone. In 1950, the United Conservation District was formed, and in 1953, bonds were issued for major construction projects that would move pumping inland and combat the effects of seawater intrusion. In 1953, these major construction projects were supported by the City of Oxnard, City of Port Hueneme, and the United States Navy. The projects included a new 100,000 acre-foot storage reservoir known as Lake Piru, an improved Santa Clara River diversion and groundwater recharge basins, what they called the Lower River System pipelines and canals, El Rio groundwater recharge facility and pumping plant, and the Oxnard-Hueneme pipeline. The estimated cost for all these improvements at the time in 1953 was $11 million. Here are some photographs dated 1955 and 1956 showing the construction of the Oxnard-Hueneme pipeline along Pleasant Valley Road, and this goes to the naval base. And here's a photograph dated in 1956 of the El Rio groundwater recharge basins. At the time, there was 8 wells drilled. Surface water came in and was pumped out by the wells. There's 80 acres of percolation ponds. And you can see there was very little development, urban development in this area at the time. Cities were starting to expand. In 1949, the city of Oxnard and Port Hueneme were in the green area. Those were the urban areas. And in 2019, that's what the cities look like now. In the early 1950s, the populations of city of Oxnard and Port Hueneme were less than 30,000. Today, the population served is over 230,000. And during that time, groundwater demand and the importation of state water, project water, continued to increase. So today, the El Rio groundwater recharge basins have a total of 12 wells, 9 in the upper aquifer system and 3 in the lower aquifer system. The treatment consists of slow sand filtration, that's natural, and we have chlorine disinfection and chloramine disinfection in the distribution system. We have a 71 CFS booster pump capacity. We have both electric and natural gas. In the event of emergencies, we would use natural gas. The pipeline is 12 miles long, goes from 42 inches to 24 inches, and has a current design capacity of 53 CFS. And our allocation through Fox Canyon GMA right now is 11,757 acre-feet per year. So now I'm going to define the situation and the reason we are planning to construct iron and manganese treatment. As I mentioned earlier, there are 9 upper aquifer system wells and 3 lower aquifer system wells. The upper aquifer system wells are relatively inexpensive to operate, but can experience a loss of production during droughts and increasing nitrate concentrations. The lower aquifer system wells are deeper, more expensive to operate, and have high concentrations of iron and manganese. The iron and manganese does contribute to membrane fouling, which is measured by the silt density index, and I'll talk about that later. It's important to note that the lower aquifer system wells are not significantly impacted by droughts. So in 2011, at about the start of the drought, our upper aquifer system wells were reliable. And there's the 9 shown right there in the groundwater elevation above about 60 feet. In 2018, a lack of groundwater recharge resulted in over 50% production loss in these wells. During that time, we abandoned 2 of our wells as part of our well maintenance program and replaced them with 2 new wells that had deeper set pump bowls. There's a correlation between decreasing groundwater elevations and increasing nitrate concentrations. And as you can see on this graph, there's multiple upper aquifer system wells, and a number of them exceed the maximum contaminant level for nitrates, which is 10 milligrams per liter as nitrogen. We manage these concentrations by blending with the lower aquifer system wells. And the finished water is shown by the thick red line. Hopefully you can all see my cursor. That is our finished water going out the plant. So again, we were able to manage that during the drought by blending. In 2011, our lower aquifer system wells were reliable. And in 2018, you can see the difference in the groundwater elevation. They continue to be reliable with very minimal loss in production. Iron and manganese concentrations in lower aquifer system wells are relatively stable. We have high iron concentration in well 13 and high manganese concentration in well 14. In all cases, the iron and manganese were above the maximum contaminant level. And for those who aren't familiar, iron and manganese is a secondary drinking water standard. Therefore, it doesn't affect immediate health, but it does impact taste, color, and odor. Another important thing to note is that when we're operating our lower aquifer system wells and blending with our upper aquifer system wells, the city or Port Port Hueneme Water Agency cannot operate its brackish water treatment plant due to the blended water having a silt density index over 3.0. And as you can see on this graph, the blue representing the upper aquifer system wells, and the red representing the lower aquifer system wells, and the green representing the silt density index, and this red line being 3.0. Anytime we're blending, that silt density is above 3.0. And these measurements were taken by your agency. When we're operating just the upper aquifer system wells, it drops well below. So we don't have that same problem with our upper aquifer system wells. So our strategy during drought events is to install iron and manganese treatment and get rid of the iron, manganese, and silt density index problems. Meanwhile, we'll still leverage the energy efficiency of the upper aquifer system wells by blending. The State Water Resources Control Board has mandated that we install iron and manganese treatment as long as we are operating the lower aquifer system wells. So every year we're required to request a waiver from our customers to deliver water laden with iron and manganese above the maximum contaminant level. And in 2016, the responses were counted as votes for treatment. So in 2017, we received a letter from Division of Drinking Water mandating that we install iron and manganese treatment. The good news is in 2018, we applied for a grant from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation under the Drought Response Program, and was awarded $300,000 for this project, and we'll continue to search for similar opportunities. So in 2016, we prepared a feasibility study for an iron manganese treatment plant. We conducted a pilot study that evaluated the effectiveness of two types of filter media, and that's green sand plus topped with anthracite and Lanox or pyrulusite. What we learned from these types of filter media is that both of them removed the iron and manganese to non-detect levels. And it also, both medias exceeded our expectations in terms of filter flow rate of 6 GPM per square foot. The Lanox actually had a higher filter loading rate, but produced a higher silt density index. So that wasn't good, and we selected Green Sand Plus as our preferred media. In 2018, we performed another pilot study, and this time we built and operated the treatment skid in-house with the guidance of our design consultant, Kennedy Jenks. In this pilot study, we used one type of filter media, the Green Sand Plus, and we ran the filters to failure to a differential pressure of 8 psi. We're mostly interested in what would be generated in the sludge, what would concentrate in the filters, and as we backwash it, we have to dispose of that sludge. So today we're still evaluating the results and considering our options for sludge disposal. So our design consultant, Kennedy Jenks, has been busy preparing the final design of the treatment plant. We're currently at 30% design. And what I'm showing you now is the 30% design layout superimposed on our existing site. And the forward flow is relatively simple. So the raw water comes into 2 filter vessels, and we inject chlorine, and that's our oxidant. And the filter effluent leaves the facility and blends with the upper aquifer system wells. We'll also be utilizing our backwash tank. We'll be decanting that water and recycling it back into the raw water stream. So there's very little water wasted in this process. Now I'm showing you the backwash operation. So we'll be taking finished water, that's chloraminated water from our plant, and basically reversing the flow in the filters, injecting with air to help loosen up the media. And the effluent would go to a tank where the solids would settle out, and we would occasionally maybe biannually or annually remove the sludge, and we decant that water again and run it back to the plant. So this is just an example of the filter vessels, about 40 feet in length and about 12 feet in diameter. There would be 2 of these. There would be room to expand in the future. We actually started off with smaller filter vessels, but we decided because of economics, these were our best option. And here's an example of a wash water recovery tank. And this is actually an iron and manganese treatment facility in Santa Paula that's worked quite well and also happens to be designed by Kennedy Jenks. And it's just an example of what the tank might look like. Again, we'd be able to settle solids, remove it from either a sewer connection or a truck connection, and decant the water. And I did not intentionally mean to skip that slide there. Let's go back here. Okay. This is the current construction cost estimate. We are currently at $5.7 million for this project. We again have a U.S. Bureau of Reclamation grant in the order of $300,000. And it's important to note that we are not finished with our search for grants. We're at the 30% design level. We have some time to go before we reach 100%, and we will be looking to recoup 50%, which is pretty typical of grants. We're also doing a little value engineering. So we had a company come out called BEST, and what they do is they do a well profiling, and they inject a pulsed dye, and they're able to measure flow rate coming out of each zone of a well screen. And also they have a ability to extract a water sample and measure the contaminants. So the theory is you have a well that has productive zones and not so productive zones. And your contaminant might not be within those productive zones. So you could potentially block those zones by installing something like a packer system or an engineered suction. So this is something we're looking very seriously at. If anything, it's going to help this treatment process be more efficient. We'd be using less oxidant.
So going back to that slide, so that means that you're going to be looking to draw water within that range?
Yes, we'd be looking to draw water from the productive zones. Now the cost is you might lose a little production in the process if you end up blocking some parts of the well. But again, you have to go through the analysis first and have enough discrete intervals to analyze. And that's what we've done for 2 wells so far. So on the project schedule, again, we started the pilot plant study in 2016 and completed the feasibility study that was distributed to all the Oxnard-Hueneme pipeline customers at the time. We awarded a design contract for iron and manganese treatment in July 2018 and operated our pilot plant also at the end of 2018. We're currently at 30% design completion. That was as of March 2019. We have a meeting coming up with Division of Drinking Water to discuss this design. We plan on having 100% design completed by the end of 2019 and complete construction by the first quarter of 2021. So with that, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, thank you for your time.
All right, thank you for the presentation. Any questions from the board here? Any questions? Yes. Yes.
Robert, as I understand the project, we would continue like normal operation to use the upper wells when we can. This would just be for drought times.
Correct.
And I guess I wouldn't have asked this question 3 years ago, and I know you guys are the engineering group, but with where the groundwater sustainability plan is moving and the potential reductions in either lower or upper aquifer systems and the need to rely heavier on the lower system going forward if we had to, or to make the project viable. I just ask that maybe we explore that as you guys move ahead to make sure that if there's going to be some heavier reliance and routine blending, that it's not going to impact what may come out of the GSP ultimately.
Right. We are allowing room for expansion up to all 3 of the wells, so we're building for a full build out. And to go back to your earlier question, we have an energy optimization program that we utilize our upper aquifer system wells first because they are less energy intensive, up to a point where we can't use them. The nitrate concentrations are too high to be able to use.
Thank you. I think and then this is just a curiosity question. The slide that Chair Munoz commented on about the zones and basically putting in, I forget the term that you used, within the wells where you're only going to pump from unimpacted zones, if you will. Is there a concern of migration as if you begin pumping from, say you put a block in there and you pump from a lower level, or are you just going to begin migrating those constituents?
We had a similar concern, and this consultant has looked at 750 wells across California, and they've seen patterns, and so they'll give us that information, that guidance.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions from the members? Member Marcus?
This may not be pertinent at this time, but what about cost for the final product that we will all be responsible for? Do you have any idea?
I don't have an idea at this time. I know they're going through a budgeting process, so I'm sure that will be looked at closely.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions? No? All right. Thank you for your presentation. And
Some closing comments?
Yes,
and
please.
to address the question about what participated portion you might be responsible for, we do routinely every year meet with the OH group, which includes Phwa Water Agency, and in that budget process we go item by item. So while we're finalizing those budgetary numbers, that will certainly be transparent. And yeah, I just again would like to thank you for allowing us the opportunity to be here and present tonight, but also just to re-emphasize that, you know, even so much back in the 50s, you know, there were issues, and I know there's a lot of noise about allocation and sustainability plans and, you know, water availability and sustainability for the future. But not unlike then, you know, I think what that common theme is, if we can come together and work on a regional approach, you know, you make some really, really good things happen. I mean, you see where, you know, the city was at one particular time. We worked together, and that allowed expansion, viability, sustainability. And while we still have, obviously, water quality and seawater intrusion, you know, there's a plan. There's a plan moving forward. It's not easy to do things alone, but when you do come together, it's not only more cost effective, but you know, the efficiencies just go through the roof. So we really want to promote. We've got a really great long-standing relationship, and we look forward to continuing that relationship moving forward with a lot of complex issues that we have to face.
yeah,
I
go ahead,
no.
Member Marcus. Go ahead.
Very quickly, is there a copy of your PowerPoint that we could distribute to our board members?
Absolutely, we
Okay.
can certainly provide
I think it
that.
would be helpful. The history is interesting. And
All right, so
Absolutely.
we'll go ahead and make sure that our city manager can do that. So if you send him the PowerPoint, we can get it to the other members who aren't here.
Absolutely.
Did you have a comment? Oh, okay, yeah, the same question, okay, all
You
right,
got-
super.
Yeah, and it's really interesting when you start going back into those archives and just seeing, you know, some of the things they were, you know, talking about back then we're talking about today. So we'll make sure we get that.
Yeah, we appreciate you and your team forward thinking and making sure that when we're receiving the water, it's a good quality water that we can run through our facility. And I believe at the very end, the customer is going to be happy too. So we appreciate your time this afternoon.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so we move on to consent agenda. We have minutes of the regular meeting of March 18th. Recommend to approve and cash disbursements from March 2nd through April 5th, 2019, and to ratify the disbursements.
I would move approval for the consent agenda.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, a motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. So motion carries unanimously. Then we move on to business items. We'll start with item number 3, Brackish Water Reclamation Demonstration Facility Operational Report, and that's Mr. Villafana.
Good afternoon, Board. It's good news today for the report. The SDI, the silt density index levels for the month of March were all below 2. So the plant was in operation the whole month, which is very good for the water quality. This month, or in March, we used approximately 2.63 million gallons per day. That's a little bit more than we used in February. February, we used 2.54 million gallons. And in January, we used 2.7 million gallons. We're still within what our historical range is, and so we're not going to exceed our allocation. And in March, United Water supplied approximately 86% of our water, and with Cayugas providing just under 14%. And we are in compliance with all state standards for water quality for the month of March. And if there are any questions.
Okay, thank you for the report. Any questions for Mr. Villafana? No? All right. Thank you very much. So we're to receive and file then, the report. Do we need a motion for that? Okay. And number 4, we move on to this item, allocation ordinance update. So it's a verbal update from Mr. Alicon.
First off, I apologize for the logo. I often recycle these presentations, as you know, and here's clear and present evidence. However, the rest of the presentation is fresh material, and I do want to give a disclaimer here. As I go through the content of this presentation, I'm going to talk about where we are with negotiations that include United Water Conservation District, as well as the City of Oxnard and Fox Canyon GMA. Nothing of what I say isn't something that hasn't been discussed among staff or with the attorneys involved. So obviously, with ongoing negotiations, you don't want to divulge any information that could be used adversely. So that being said, if you recall, we've been tracking 2 issues over the last several months. One is the pre-sigma versus T base period, and that's still hanging out there. Today's discussion, I want to focus on item number 2, which is the OH pipeline allocation holder record issue. So the GMA has said to us, if all parties can agree, and what they mean by all parties, they mean City of Oxnard, PHWA, and United Water Conservation District, if you can all agree on language to include in the ordinance, we'll go ahead and consider it. It's not a guarantee that the GMA will include that language. It's just an acknowledgement that if we can reach an agreement, they will study it and see if it can be included in the ordinance. We had a meeting last Tuesday, and that meeting was very well attended. As you can see on the screen, there's representatives, executive representation from all parties involved, as well as counsel from every single party involved. So we had all the right minds at the table to try and come up with language that could be included in the future draft of the ordinance. So what I want to do is kind of go through the priorities or the preferences of what each agency is looking for, or the goals that they're looking for in any new language that we want to develop. I'll start with Oxnard, and you can really put PHWA on this list too. We have alignment on item number 1 up on the screen, which is a recognition in the ordinance that the allocation that belongs to the OH pipeline system is really a sub-allocation for the benefit of the OH pipeline contractors. That's kind of what we as staff have been saying all along. That's what our board has been giving us feedback on, as well as our special counsel, Peter Candy, has been pitching for this whole time. Where we have a little bit of disagreement with Oxnard, not because we don't like the idea, but mainly because of its feasibility of including it in an ordinance, is item number 2. And that is the ability to opt out of the OH system and retain allocation. Oxnard feels fairly strongly about this second item, and so while it is Oxnard's preference to have language like this in the ordinance, the OH pipeline agreement, which really is what governs our water usage through United, is pretty clear about what would happen in that scenario if you do want to withdraw from the OH pipeline. And the term up there that we can kind of take home with us is that mutual agreement term. If any party, and by party I mean the OH contractor, if any contractor wants to withdraw from the OH pipeline, any discussion about subcredits or suballocation or allocation in general would have to be negotiated amongst mutual agreement of both United and the withdrawing party. This is section 17 of the OH pipeline agreement, which has been in place for some time. The idea being is that a longstanding agreement kind of already speaks to this very scenario that Oxnard seems to want to address in this allocation ordinance. So if I can shift to United, and they've said as much at the desk or at the negotiating table, as well as during public comment. They really want to, for lack of a better term, retain the status quo, meaning that any terms of withdrawal by any OH contractor would be by mutual agreement of United and that withdrawing party. So it's essentially mimicking what's already in the OH pipeline agreement. And then Fox Canyon, kind of a similar story. They want to retain their oversight role in managing the basin, and that's understood as the GMA and what's going to be the GSA. Fox Canyon is keenly interested in making sure that if there's going to be any withdrawal, any transfer of allocation, that they really have the oversight ability as the governing agency. And this came up actually when we were deciding on what language that both PHWA's council wanted to include and Oxnard's council wanted to improve or include. What Oxnard had pitched was an idea that any change, any withdrawal, and any negotiation that ensues from that would be subject to de novo review by court. And so for the attorneys in the room, de novo review is essentially asking for less deference to the administering agency and having a court kind of decide it at first look and not really relying so much on the agency's decision, but looking at it at its own set of facts and coming to its own determination. And so from Fox Canyon's standpoint, that's kind of a non-starter. To include any language whatsoever about a de novo review in this context is not something Fox Canyon has any interest in including, and would likely be booted back to us in a heartbeat. In fact, they've said as much, only because it undermines their ability to manage the basin. It takes away certain powers that they currently have, and so when it comes to including language in the ordinance, Fox Canyon would take issue to anything that made reference to de novo review or that requirement. So after we had that meeting, and this is a lot of words on the page, and I realize that, but I just want to point your attention to the highlighted portions, and we'll go through them one by one. Over the last few slides, we talked about PHWA and Oxnard's goals, we talked about United's goals, and we talked about Fox Canyon's goals. And what Peter Candy, and he's the one who drafted this language after last Tuesday's meeting, he tried to take feedback from around the room and come up with language that tried to satisfy all parties. And it wasn't easy. And if he were here, he'll tell you how much he struggled. It's kind of like a teeter-totter. You try and add more here, and it sends the other thing kind of out of whack. But I want to shift your attention towards the highlighted portion in yellow. That yellow portion is meant to satisfy the OH contractors. So it's a recognition that allocation on the OH system is a sub-allocation as defined in the OH pipeline agreement. So in a sense, you can say, all right, Oxnard, Port Hueneme, and the other OH contractors, this portion of the ordinance language is for you to address your needs and your goals. The highlighted portion in blue is meant to address United's goals, which is to retain that mutual agreement language and make sure that their interests are preserved. And that language in green is meant to address Fox Canyon's goals, which is that instead of having any sort of withdrawal proceeding overseen by a court subject to de novo review, it's that any withdrawal or any transfer of allocation is overseen by the agency with review and approval by them as set forth in Article 9. So really what Peter was trying to do is balance the interests of all the folks around the table, including us, to try and get a place marker in the ordinance. Because right now we're butting up against a deadline, and I'm going to get to that in a second. So our next steps here is hopefully come to an agreement on this language by the 23rd, and that date is looming. That's 8 days from now. And that date was set by GMA staff, who is drafting the next version of the ordinance probably as we speak, with anticipation to adopt a new ordinance, or the next version of the ordinance, on May 10th. That's a Friday. And so that date is also quickly approaching. I don't know, I couldn't tell you today, right now, where Oxnard stands or the other parties stand with respect to the language I just showed you on the previous slide. It's consistent to language which United's council has already agreed to, so we're hopeful that they'll be amenable to that language as well. We're waiting to hear back from Oxnard on how they want to proceed. So hopefully we can get to a unanimous support on this, and if so, we would contact the GMA and say, okay, all parties are on board with this language. Please include it in the ordinance or make any edits you see fit. That's the hope. After the 23rd, we really have exhausted our avenue on this one. We really need to shift to what I consider to be maybe more of the important of the two issues, which is shifting our focus towards crafting the variance. And we kept talking about that, and we've really put a lot of our effort into addressing the OH issue. Now that that one's coming to a close, hopefully, we're now going to try and put more time and effort into crafting the variance and making sure that we correctly state to the GMA why we feel that past use is maybe not a good indicator of future use. So with that, I'm available for any questions.
Okay, are there any questions? Mr. Alcon? No? Yes, go ahead, Member Hernandez.
Thank you for your presentation. Being new to this board, this question may sound silly, but what is the significance of being identified as a sub-allocation in that language? What's the significance of that? I'm sure you shared that with us before, but if you could refresh my memory.
That is not a silly question
Okay.
at all, Director Hernandez. In fact, he could be on the board or even on staff for years and still ask that question. The recognition of sub-allocation right now, in the ordinance language, section 5.2 of the most recent draft states that the allocation belongs to the extraction facility, which in this case is United Water Conservation District's facilities. And there's no mention really that the allocation is really being used to serve municipal water providers downstream. And you know, part of it is a recognition that the municipal providers have a stake, and there's I don't ever want to use the term water right, but a water, I guess, allocation, a sub-allocation. I'm using kind of circular definitions here, but just a recognition that there are municipal users that have a stake here and are interested. And when it comes to, you know, if there's ever discussions down the road, when it comes to renegotiations of the OH pipeline down the road, we now kind of have a place in the ordinance that we can point to that shows that, hey, municipal users, you know, have a stake here.
Thank you. And what can we do to help you get over that hurdle with the language at this point?
Thank you again for the offer and the invitation. You know, this board has done a lot in the way of providing staff the resources in the way of Peter Candy, who's been instrumental. He's been given a tall task, and in my estimation, he's been nothing short of exceptional. So I think you've done, you know, probably the most important thing you can do in the way of hiring a special counsel. I know a lot of members of this board have relationships with city council members and board members and other agencies. That's important to foster those. However, I think some of the hurdles we're dealing with are at the executive staff level. And I'm not so sure if elected officials are able or can really get into the weeds on that sort of thing. But if I can't think about that more and get back to you, okay. I would like to brainstorm, but it's a great question. I appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, Member Bouchard.
Just like to make a quick comment and observation that the work this board has done, or at least given Akbar the tools to, he and Peter Candy made tremendous progress with the GMA board at the last meeting that this hearing came forward, where they actually had the opportunity to explore it. Prior to that, it was basically a no-go, and they had a very good exchange with the GMA board where they began to understand the particular risks in not having any recognition within it. So I just compliment you guys for that effort, and I also, with United in the Room, appreciate your guys' understanding of where it's coming from and trying to remain consistent with the long-standing history that the agencies have with United, and trying to keep the ordinance consistent with agreements that were entered into voluntarily on all parties' behalf.
You know, adding to that, these are significant steps that allow us to then understand this relationship, you know, very, very important relationship that we have, but moving forward as, you know, as we're asked to present information. And so I appreciate your diligence and hard work, along with Attorney Candy's work as well, and of course then Rod Butler on that too. So thanks for the report.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are at the point of the meeting for board member reports, comments, and requests for future agenda items. So we'll start at your end here. Nothing? Okay.
I can make up something,
Marcus?
No.
Member Bouchard.
I would just like to ask that perhaps we do have some new board members, and I think if I read Mauricio correctly out there, he's got a lot he'd like to share about what United's been up to in the way of trying to advance those regional goals for all of us in Ventura County, and perhaps getting him on the agenda to share where they're at with their legislative efforts and some of the other issues that are impacting their operations along the Freeman diversion, ultimately impact us. And with that, I'd just say a happy tax day. I wrote my check. Did you?
So a follow-up to that would be is that if we could schedule United on the agenda every so often, working with Rod Butler here to get you on the calendar, that would be super. Yeah, thank you. Okay, thanks. And Member Hernandez, nothing? Okay. All right, I don't have anything to add as well. So at this point then, we will adjourn to the regular meeting on Monday.
Sure.
Yes,
Sure.
oh, yes.
I was just going to mention,
Sorry
I'm not formally on the agenda now, but quick calendar item, and we'll follow up with some email correspondence. It looks like for at least two good reasons, we will be canceling the May 20th PHWA meeting. If there is anything time sensitive that comes up in the next few weeks, we may contact you about rescheduling for another date in May, but it looks like we're going to be able to cancel that meeting without causing any havoc to any schedules. So assume that we're off for May 20th, back on for June, I believe it's the 17th. And again, we'll send out an email to confirm all of this.
Okay, very good. So we'll await for if there's going to be another meeting sometime in May, but if not, then we will be holding a meeting in June on the 17th. Thank you all.